Dragged by a Bear, Colin Dowler's survival tale, Result of Instinct, Episode 1. In summer 2019, I was exploring potential hiking routes to climb Mount Dowler in British Columbia. I was cycling down a narrow logging path when I came around a corner and spotted a grizzly bear. I had seen 2 or 3 black bears before, and usually if you make some noise, they move away. But this was the first time I had seen a grizzly, and it was staring at me. I got off of my bike since it wasn't moving. Um, I was peering out of the corner of my eye and noticed it slinking towards me until it was only a couple of feet away. It had almost cleared past my bike until it made a 180-degree turn towards me. I spun around to put the bike between us and got my hiking pole out as it moved closer. Placing it between its eyes, it pushed back a little, and that seemed like a decent stalemate until it rolled its head, bit Malone to the pole, and tossed it away. I took off my bag and threw it to the side. I thought it would go for the food in there instead of me. It took a sniff, but then started prodding me with its paw. Each poke got a little more aggressive until it lifted its paw high. I thought it would inflict some serious damage, so I threw my bike at it, lunged forward, and sank its teeth between my ribs and hips on my left side. And soon I was in the bear's mouth as it carried me 30 or 40 feet towards a bush. I was in crushing pain. It put me down, and I tried to gouge at its eyes, but I couldn't reach. I was thrashing while it pinned me and started biting and tearing at my thigh. It was so painful. It felt like my hip was going to dislocate. It excavated into my thigh so far I could hear its teeth grinding against my femur, like a dog chewing a bone. I started saying goodbye to my wife and kids in my head and felt guilty that I'd even taken this trip in the first place. Then I realized I had a pocket knife. I had to use both hands while I was still pinned down, but I eventually managed to get it out. The blade was under 3 inches long, but I gave the bear a stab in its neck with all the energy I had. When I pulled the knife out, it lifted its head up and a big gush of blood splashed onto my waist. It got off me and walked to my bike, sniffed at it for a while, and then stood back at the bush where it had stepped out from. I knew I had to move fast, otherwise I'd bleed to death. While the bear was still watching, I cut the sleeve off my shirt and made a tourniquet for my left leg. I looked over again and the bear had gone. It was 12.1 ME, and I knew there wouldn't be any loggers here until later in the afternoon. So I dragged myself to my bicycle, gathered my wits, and started pedaling with one leg for about 45 minutes until I finally saw a logger's cabin. This time, the bear was still hitting the door was open, and I crashed into their stairwell, yelling for help. Thank God there were 5 guys there who seemed panicked, but got their first aid kits out and called 911 while patching my 60 puncture wounds up. One wound was so big that my kidney was visible. An air ambulance came about an hour later. They gave me 2 pints of blood on the cabin floor and then flew me to hospital for 6.5-hour surgery. The next day, I began 40 days of recovery at Vancouver General Hospital. They had me back up and walking 24 days after the attack. And by January 2020, the specialists were seeing some nerve regeneration in my left leg. By February, I began jogging on a treadmill. In September, I ran a half marathon. Mentally, it was a lot harder than I thought it would be, getting back into the woods. I made a conscious effort to walk in the bush behind my house as soon as I could so I wouldn't be overwhelmed by fear. I used tactics to help me, like playing music in headphones to drown out the noise of critters moving around. I have since bumped into a few black bears on the trails too, but I yell and they get out of the way a couple times.